Hi, I'm Rachel Frank, and I'm on the eastern corner of Fort Greene Park in Brooklyn. And I'm here to lead you on a virtual social distancing walk where we will be exploring the hidden worlds, communications, and relationships that go on in urban parks like Fort Greene Park here. And I wanted to select Fort Greene Park, one, because it's close to my home, but two, I like the park because it's slightly smaller. Some of us have the luxury of living near larger parks like Central Park, Prospect Park, or Inwood, and those parks are amazing for seeing wildlife and native plant species, but some of us live closer to smaller parks or lack large green spaces at all. So I wanted to highlight this park as a smaller park that is close to where I live, but also has a lot of examples of hidden communications, relationships, and ecosystems that you can see in the urban New York City environment. So let's get started. And when starting a walk, I usually like to go out early in the morning. The morning is the best time to be able to see some diurnal birds or daytime birds because morning is when they are spending time foraging or trying to attract mates or finding food. If you want to look for insects, actually afternoon is probably a better time because insects require warmth from the sun to sort of warm their bodies up and are more active during the afternoon, looking for food, pollinating plants, those kinds of activities. And when starting my walk, I usually like to find an open grassy area to sit and sort of center myself and take in the sounds around me, the bird sounds, the city sounds, and possibly people walking around. And this allows me to sort of be quiet and start to listen.
So we're just going to sit here for a moment and take in the sounds and think about the various communications that are going on around us. I think with coronavirus, a lot of us were spending a lot of time indoors unless we were essential workers and still going out to work. And during this time, a lot of people started to notice the bird sounds outside their windows as the city quieted down and we were spending more time inside with potentially less things to do. And the birds were probably already here around this time because this is their big migration and breeding season in the spring. But because we were being more quiet and potentially listening more, we were able to hear them better. And I want to dwell on that for a moment in thinking about how we can connect to the nature around us more and slow down. There's been a rise in interest in birding since the pandemic started, and I've read that more and more people are downloading apps to identify birds they hear and see outside their windows. And most recently on social media, there was the Black Birders Week, which was extremely popular and was made in response to Christian Cooper's experience of being racially targeted while birding in Central Park. And I think our experience of birds and of nature during this time has been kind of a great resource for us as we navigate amidst all of this grief and anxiety that's been going on around us for the last few months. So I just wanted to sit here for a little bit and continue to listen. And turning to my right a little to get a better or a different angle, I want to start to think about the different communications that are going on all around us when we're in nature and in a park like Fort Greene Park. There's the chemical communications, the volatile organic compounds or VOCs that plants are giving off in the form of smells. And if I didn't have my mask on, maybe I'd be able to smell some of the grass smell or the flowers that are blooming right now because it's spring or early summer. And with these chemicals that the plants are making and producing, they're having different effects. So they may be using those smells to warn other plants of an invading insect, or they may be producing sweet smells in the form of flowers to attract pollinators. And along with these volatile organic compounds or different chemical smells that the plants are producing to give off different signals to each other, or sometimes to other species like insects, they're also communicating beneath us, where we sit here, beneath the earth, with each other. Trees are using fungi as kind of a telephone wire to help communicate with one another about different threats or changes in the ecosystem. So I like to think about all the ways that there are these different communications that we might be able to hear or smell or not even see, but communications that are going on all around us when we're outside, or even when we're on a city street and just close to trees or plants. And if you sit quietly long enough, you often start to notice things. Like I spied this little squirrel that decided to enjoy his or her breakfast right here by this stick. And from this grassy area, we can start to look more closely at the ground. And here are some tulip tree flowers. And if we examine them more closely, sometimes you will see ants collecting the sweet juices from inside the flower. Bees will also seek out the nectar from the tulip trees, and eastern tiger swallowtail caterpillars like to eat the leaves of the tulip trees. But returning to the ants, these ants are also leaving a chemical trail when they're foraging for food, and this chemical trail is leaving a marker for the rest of the ants in the colony to allow them to find this food and bring it back to the nest.
So after sitting in the grass for a little while as an introduction to listening, I'm going to head up the hill and take you to a couple other spaces to talk about additional communications and relationships going on in the park.
And before we move up the hill, I just want to pause at this planted green space garden that's right by the headquarters of Fort Greene Park to look at the flowers that are planted here. There's some milkweed that has not yet started blooming, and there's also what I believe is fleabane blooming here. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a recent study that showed that bumblebees can actually help induce plants to start blooming. When bees arrive from hibernation and the flowers have not yet opened in timing with their cycles, scientists have found that they will actually bite the plant's leaves, making small incisions to try and stress the plant, which encourages it to start producing flowers. And when thinking about this, I wonder if this adaptation will become more needed as climate change stresses the timings of these interactions between insects and the plants that support them.
And frequently on my walks, I like to sit on the stone wall that is just adjacent to the park headquarters. And in this area, there's a lovely grove of Ginkgo trees, maidenhair Ginkgo trees actually, which is a great place to look for the Yellowbellied Sapsucker woodpecker. You can often find them pecking holes and tapping veins to get the sap out from these trees. So we're just going to sit here for a moment and see if one of the woodpeckers shows up.
And if we go in a little closer, we can actually see some of his sap wells, or the holes that he has pecked to get sap out of. And frequently these will be in a line, so there will be one and then another one above or below. And this is sort of like when you would open a high C or a tomato can of juice, and you would want to open both sides to allow the liquid to flow better. So he's tapped this vein so that it will flow a little bit better by tapping above and below. And a lot of other species use these sap holes that the sapsucker makes, including porcupines and hummingbirds and insects, to make it easier to get the sap from these holes. And here's one of the yellow-bellied sapsuckers now. You can see him pecking holes in order to get sap from. And because we're sitting here in this grove of ginkgos, I wanted to talk a little bit about the ginkgo tree. I think most people know that they are considered a living fossil because they've been around for hundreds of millions of years and have remained relatively unchanged, or at least recognizable from their fossil form. And one reason why that's important or interesting is because they give us a good idea of climate change and how carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has changed over time. You can look at fossil records, and the leaves and a lot of the aspects of the ginkgo are recognizable from the Permian period. So if we were to take one of these leaves and look at it under a powerful microscope, we would be able to see the pores of the leaves, or the stomata. And the amount of stomata or pores that the leaf needs to bring in carbon dioxide can tell us a lot about the levels that were present at different times during the Earth's history. And one other thing I like to think about with the ginkgo and with other species of plants that have been around for a long time is the idea of evolutionary anachronisms. So frequently in the city we plant a lot of male trees, which is why a lot of us have issues with allergies, because there's so much pollen that is produced by male trees. And we plant a lot of male trees because we dislike a lot of the seeds and pods that are produced by female trees. And one of those that is particularly disliked is the female ginkgo tree, because the fruit has this really rancid smell. I kind of think it smells a little bit like vomit, or something that has gone rotten. And not a lot of animals will disperse the seeds of the ginkgo tree by eating this fruit. But that rancid smell is another example of a VOC that the tree has put off to attract something to eat its fruit and seeds with it and disperse them. And so some scientists think that the tree created that smell to attract animals that are now extinct, because it evolved during a much earlier time period. And potentially those animals may have been extinct squirrels or carrion-eating dinosaurs that would have been attracted to that rancid odor and would have eaten the fruit and the seeds with them, and then pooped them out in other areas and thus dispersed the seeds. And a lot of seeds do require an animal's digestive system or a bird's gizzard or stomach acids to help score them or erode them in order for them to germinate. And if we walk down the hill in either direction really from the grove of ginkgo trees, there are a lot of examples of large oak trees which occur in parks throughout the city. And this is another place I wanted to take you to explore and think about another hidden relationship that's going on around us beneath our feet. I'm sitting at the base of a large red oak tree, and you can see the squirrels are really enjoying eating the acorns from this tree. There's a lot of red oaks and other types of oaks all over the city. They're a native tree, And Fort Greene has a couple of them that are quite big and old. And if we look at the base of the tree, we'll see a lot of acorns, actually more likely acorn parts and pieces because the squirrels have already gotten to them. But if we look hard enough at this acorn litter, we may find a whole acorn that has a hole in it. And this acorn was burrowed into by a weevil, a type of insect that has a long mouthpiece. And the female of the insect will use this long mouthpiece to make a hole in the center of the acorn to lay her egg, and a larva will develop inside that acorn and use the innards of the acorn as a food source. And then once the larva gets large enough, it will burrow itself out and actually burrow into the ground for 2 years as it sort of develops down there. And once this acorn has been evacuated, there's actually specialized insects, ants, in fact, that will often use it for a home and are specialized in just that type of acorn that has been burrowed out by the weevil larva. So I bring this up just to talk about sort of the hidden worlds and relationships that are going on around our feet. Oaks are incredibly common in parks and even on city streets, and so you may find acorns like this if you're looking hard enough that have this relationship to both as a food source for these beetles and larvae, and then become a home for the ants. This is the time of year also that there are a lot of young fledglings, like this young fledgling robin that I see in the grass. And people sometimes make the mistake of thinking that these birds need help, but typically their parents are close by and are just giving them some space to learn how to fly and in some cases find food on their own, and will return to them when you leave the area. So I just wanted to show this guy, but I'm going to give him some space so his mom can come back and look after him. And I wanted to conclude this walk in light of the recent events going on both locally and nationally, to read a poem by Ross Gay. It's called A Small Needful Fact. Is that Eric Gardner worked for some time for Parks and Rec, Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants which most likely, some of them, in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. Thanks for joining me.